that's the easiest media to get. Do not pay someone like me to get that for you. If you think about it, there's less than 10 people in your local market who would ever write or cover you. That's a very small audience that you could build your own Rolodex,
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems and sometimes stopping the bleeding, right, Cam?
Yeah, which is, I got to admit, it's a very small problem. Stopping the bleeding makes it sound really big, but it is a teeny tiny little cut on my hand.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some folks out there that figuratively need to stop the bleeding. Hopefully there's not too many people out there that need to literally stop the bleeding.
Apply pressure, folks.
Yeah, apply pressure. And
put it above your heart.
Yep. And, if you got some of that anticoagulation stuff we used to use, dump some of that on there. See, this is what happens when I ramble too much. Now I got to ramble again. When I was a kid growing up, learning to shave, they had that powder, that anti-cut powder. And I see our guest Mickey's nodding his head. He's like, "Yeah, I remember that stuff." That was nothing more than anticoagulation powder that we use in combat. So, how about that?
Really?
It was in these little bags and stuff. Mickey, did you ever use that stuff?
I didn't, but we had something like that after you cut yourself that you dab it a little bit, and it was that anticoagulant into like a little gel or liquid, but not liquid skin, just a little, stuff that you put there, and it just slowed it down and stopped it.
Yeah. Well, that shows you the age difference. We're not that big of a difference, but so he had the fancy gel. We just had powder.
Right.
I was going to say, so instead of having like little pieces of toilet paper on your face wherever you were bleeding, you guys just had powder all over your face? That's real. That's real good looking.
That's it. Or you just let it bleed. That's because it was curing what ailed me. Because that, if you want to go way back, right, we're just letting it bleed because let the bad stuff bleed out of you, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Only the bad blood's going to leave. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
If you lose all your blood, well, Mickey, it's because it's all bad. You had to lose it. All right.
Yeah. Well, the bad blood rises to the surface. That's what it is, and that's those. It's funny in that sense of how we believe things until we learn things different. And Mickey, one of the things that as I was looking at what you're doing, and I'm focused, PR sticks in my head. And that's old school stuff. How are you taking this old school press release? Because I can remember as a kid, Otis graduated from Texas A&M, so I get a press release in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that was mom and dad maybe paid $10 to get that in there or something like that. I don't know. But how is in this day and age of, well, frankly, there's very few print papers. How are PR or press releases still a thing?
So, they still work. And actually, I think today they're working better than they did, say, 10 years ago. I think that 10 years ago, you're competing against PR firms pitching by email as well as phone, but mostly email. And, what's happened, since then, and probably, will continue to be a problem, is most journalists' inbox, especially if they're national media, is just chaos, and they don't rely on it anymore to find stories. A lot of media databases have come out over the years, and you pay a licensing fee of $5,000 to $20,000 a year, and you get access to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of global journalists. And you're a golf club company. Your boss just said, "Hey, we spent $10,000 on this database," have you emailed the journalist yet? And go, yeah, I emailed that press release yesterday to 483 golf people interested in golf products. And they're like, nobody's written about us or contacted us. Let's go back in the database. And all of a sudden they say, you know who likes to play golf? Bankers and finance bros. So let's send it to financial analysts. Let's send it to banking people. And all of a sudden they're getting these product golf club press releases, of which as a financial analyst, they're never going to write about that. And that's happening in every industry. And the biggest criticism I hear from journalists is my inbox is just chaos. And if I don't whitelist and filter you directly to a special folder, I probably will miss you. And so a lot of journalists, are finding a situation where, email pitches that they used to respond to, they're not. And the only way you can guarantee that they've seen it is for you to follow up and call and walk them through the search of how to find you in their inbox. But it's made
keyword, right?
Yeah, it's made them more reliant on the news wires. And in the U.S., it's a duopoly of news wires. There used to be a third player, but they're kind of like pivoted away from reaching journalists in the traditional way. And so it's Business Wire and PR Newswire. And generally, that's where most journalists are going to get their news, because when they log in and look at their industry feed, it is clean. It's not off target. A golf club person's not going to get their golf club press release on a banking feed. And journalists also have the ability to create keywords and exclude or ensure that something gets penned if it mentions a certain keyword. So it is the opposite of their inbox. And the funny thing is, when I launched eReleases, 27 years ago, I started as email, and I was novel and new. But fortunately, over the years, PR Newswire reached out to me, liked that we were supporting small businesses, and we came with a win-win situation where you get access to a PR Newswire national press release, you get all the targeting that you need, and it's not $1,700, which is what they charge for a national press release, the retail of a 600-word press release. And so through us, it's like a quarter of the price or a third of the price. And so it's a huge savings if you're a small business. And that's the only caveat that we have. If you're a big company or publicly traded, I'm going to refer you directly to our contact at PR Newswire, because that's who their salesperson is looking for. And our client base are people who have budgets of like under $2,000 a year, and their salespeople have no plans to talk to people with that kind of budget.
What do you make of the landscape for those press releases? Because at first you start talking about like emailing them and those kind of things, and it's like, okay, well that's gone. It's like, okay, well now Joe the entrepreneur down the street, he can't get his press release out, so that must be a bad thing. Then on the other hand, you think about those folks getting all those damn emails, and it's like, okay, clearly that side of the system is broken also. What do you make of that relationship there? Because at the end of the day, they want the good random news story from Joe down the street, but also if every Joe in the country starts emailing them, now all of a sudden it's not a good news story. There's all these kind of weird relationships there. What do you make of that?
So I think that, for journalists locally, email probably still does work. I think that national media are the ones that are just getting inundated with off-targeted stuff. I suspect it's still happening a little bit locally, but I don't hear as many people complaining. And I do know that people who pitch locally are still getting picked up. And so I do tell people, if you're looking for local media, that's the easiest media to get. Do not pay someone like me to get that for you. If you think about it, there's less than 10 people in your local market who would ever write or cover you. That's a very small audience that you could build your own Rolodex. Look at your local paper, who writes or covers your industry from time to time, get their name, get their email address. If you can't find it online, just reach out and ask. And a lot of people say they'll just give it to you. Well, give them the context of why. It's like, hey, I'm a local business. I like to pitch them 2 or 3 times a year as I have newsworthy events. And I know that this person covers our industry. they'll give it to you. I mean, they're members of the community. They're looking for local content. So, get that email address, introduce yourself, and pitch them. You don't have to send them a polished press release. You can just write a few sentences, maybe put a great quote in there, because if a journalist is considering two story ideas and one has an amazing quote, they know that that's going to make their article pop. And if it's just a no quote or a mediocre quote, they know that that's not really going to elevate the article. And so what I mean by a great quote is you say something very succinctly, powerfully. It could be controversial, a contrarian take, but you say something with conviction, and it's got active verbs, and it just reads as a punch. If they were to paraphrase that and not have it within a quote, there'd be a loss or ache for what was previously there. And that's, how I say, is a good quote. You don't have to be a wordsmith or a literary person and say something beautiful or something that will be remembered in history, like, JFK or presidents and things like that. But just, try to make it as condensed as possible, active verbs, and just be a punch. And ideally one sentence, two sentences are okay. Beyond that, you're losing me and you're losing them, and it loses the strength. And if you have photos, include that with your pitch. A lot of people, even local papers and other places, have an online presence, and they may not post the picture in the print, but they'll often put it in the online, and they know that that's going to increase engagement with their users. And the best photos that work are candid shots. If it's a personnel change, it might make sense to have a professional headshot. But don't waste time necessarily with a logo. But if it's a product that you're highlighting, or 10 years at the location, a picture of you and the staff that's sort of candid, against the outside, with the company brand and stuff like that. Those are great. Products and stuff like that, more candid shots, on a messy table in an office, if that's how your product is used, is better than the old professional shots on blue velvet and professionally lit and stuff like that. Those don't have great engagement. And so that's another way to stand out with local media. But just do this exercise locally. If you have a business newspaper or a business magazine, again, who would cover your industry? If you're a consumer business, and there's a consumer magazine in Baltimore, we're lucky enough to have the Baltimore Sun, a couple of other little paper startups. There's a business magazine and a business newspaper. So it's like, wow, that's a really great area. And so, that's like potentially 4 or 5 places, just there doing your research. And, also look at, is there the possibility of something for TV and radio? I see, some news stations will bring chiropractors in during Health Week and crack some necks on TV because it looks good, and it makes the sound and everybody goes, ooh, But, if you have something that plays well,
and this dude,
yeah, if you have something that plays well on video, pitch that, and also be sure to include what visually it would look like or what you're offering. And there's, radio opportunities as well. Sometimes local programming, even AM, has, good followers, and they sometimes have business shows where they do a spotlight or talk with somebody. With them, when you reach out, you're looking for the producer or booker of the show rather than like the personality. Sometimes it can be the same, but get that email address and pitch them, and what their audience will be delighted by or entertained, and what you can bring to that medium. And lastly, there's neighborhood free papers. Sometimes it's usually smaller. Those are really good for a lot of businesses that don't seem very newsworthy, but they have opportunities to talk. If you're a wedding planner, for example, or an event planner, having a monthly column in a paper like that, where you talk about something coming up, like how to make sure your Mother's Day spread is the best, or the July 4th backyard picnic or whatever is the best on the block. And then you can also cover your traditional stuff, but you get to put, and I would insist on it, that you get to have a sentence or two at the end that says who you are and your local business and your web address. And that's a great way to make an introduction with these people. These local papers and neighborhood papers are usually weeklies, and usually they're so focused on advertising that they don't think about content. And that's usually a struggle for them when they go to print, like, oh, we got to put some content in here. So if you come in and pitch them with a monthly column, a lot of them will try to get you to do a weekly column because they'd love to have content every. Just insist. I'm only comfortable giving you monthly, and or maybe whatever rhythm works for you. But that's a great way to stand out because your personality is there in a column. People do a lot of browsing, and after a while, when they think about, hey, I would like to work with somebody, they'll think of you. And the same thing in other practices. There's if you're a personal trainer, I've seen that work really well, talking about wellness and health and things to be mindful of. Heading into tick season, you could have a column about that. All kinds of things that you wouldn't think about, but it's just very rudimentary writing. There's not a lot of content, for these things, but that works really well. And again, I tell people to try to reach out locally, at least quarterly. If you have more ideas more often, you can do it more often. But try to do it at least quarterly. And I always tell people, if you're, whatever your business is, type that plus like a big city like Chicago and create a Google alert and do the same thing in like 4 or 5 big cities. You'll start to get articles from that they're writing about other businesses in other cities. And that can inspire you to be creative and say, hey, I've noticed a lot of people talking about, dry cleaners going green, and I'm a local dry cleaner. Hey, I could take this same article and its approach and make that a pitch for my business. And don't tell them, hey, I saw this in Chicago. I think it would work real well here in Millsboro, Delaware or something like that. You just say, hey, I've noticed a trend where a lot of people are talking about going green. And as a local dry cleaner, we've invested so much in going green. This is, what we've got. This is what we're doing. Here's a picture, a couple pictures that I've attached of things, and I'd love to talk to you. And again, got a great little quote there, put it in there. And that's all it takes. And then as you have more ideas and brainstorm, just, pitch them. And you may find that after a year, nothing has happened. And that's not unusual. The people who've been most successful at this have seen they start to get engagement in the second year of doing this. So they sent 4 pitches the first year, and then the second year, maybe it's the second pitch of the second quarter, and they pitch, and all of a sudden they get. And what happens is you're on their mind more. They consider you, but it's just never a good match. And then after a while, they think of you. And often it's not by your pitch, but your pitch reminds them of a story that they're thinking about and thinking, I think you would be a good example business for this article. And often they come to you and say, hey, I know you pitched me recently about this, but that wasn't a good fit. But I am writing about, work culture of, small tech companies. And I know that's your space. Could you talk to me a little bit about how you're maintaining culture post-pandemic with a lot of people wanting to work from home and things like that. And when they do that, that is them saying, I think you would be a good fit for this. And what you need to do is become a good fit for that. Don't say, oh, I think that's a stretch. I don't know. I would say, I think that's a great idea. And, I could get some pictures of, foosball night, which we do every Wednesday here, where we drink beer and stuff. And I could also, get my HR person to give you a great quote, and I could put together a quote. And I always try to get their, make sure that I can send them the quotes afterwards, because again, you want to spend a long time on that. Just being impromptu on the phone, it's probably not going to be a killer quote. And so I would just say, hey, I'd love to just spend a couple of minutes and talk to my HR person and put together a quote by me, a quote by them. And then I could circle back maybe this afternoon with you with a call. And what I find is this is so natural and it happens so often that after a while, when they're looking to plug in a local company, and they'll often think of you. I have somebody that's probably in the Baltimore Sun twice a year. It's always something kind of work related, HR related. Sometimes not, but it's like them doing stuff with charity, them doing, other kinds of fun things. I think, and I ran into them at an EO event, Entrepreneurs Organization event, and I said, "Do you advertise a lot with the Baltimore Sun?" And he laughed and he says, "Everybody accuses me of that, but we've never advertised with them, and they get 2 articles a year." I think that this is 5 years I've noticed it, and it's just because they said when they call, we drop everything. And we bring in the appropriate people to have a dialogue, and we put together great quotes and photos, and they know that we're going to be responsive, and that at the end of the day, they're going to get good content from us.
Yeah, well, and you know what I'm hearing is it's the same old, kind of a twofold thing. It's the same shit from 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Those things are still viable. Those articles, Otis graduated from Texas A&M today, or those little things like that are still very viable. And by the way, we used to do hometown press releases from the Army too, if you can believe that. Otis graduated from basic training, but as you were talking about these sort of these types of things that are coming out in periodicals, my mind was going straight to that post that we put on LinkedIn, or that job announcement that somebody else did on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. Those are the same sort of things that fit the bill for what you're just described. And I think it's like, dang. And I think you get personally, and I'm going to pause here in a minute to hear, but from you on the expertise, you get more eyes on it. And I think it gives you a higher level of trust with the audience too, doesn't it?
It does. Whenever the media writes about you or covers you, it's almost like third-party corroboration. Editor chose you, and it's almost acts like social proof or an implied endorsement in a way, and it creates this signal of trust, and that never happens with advertising. Our flags go up when we see an ad, but it doesn't when it's like original content in an article or a mention on radio or TV or something like that. And that is just something that is just very magical. The conversion rates are strong. You take that same article and you put it in front of your leads, and you're going to go from converting 30% to maybe convert 37% or close to 40%. Your churn rate might be like 20% a year, but you put these articles in front of your customers every once in a while, and the percentage of people who shop around every 2 or 3 years and that you eventually lose some of them will just say, no need to shop this year. This company's killing it. We're with the right people. And it really does act that way. And that's something that, earned media, which is what we call it, when this stuff gets picked up, is so different than any other type of content that's out there.
Could you talking about social proof of the different values of those different avenues? And I think that's something that's always evolving. Like, it makes you think of, I've heard comedians joke about this in like the podcast world and all that kind of space. Of it's like, look, I'm a freaking millionaire, but I've got to go on Fox and Friends so my mom thinks I'm successful. Like, and it's like, no, I'm not getting anything from Fox and Friends, but it's like, I have to, because that's the only thing that makes sense to that generation. So there's always going to be those like demographic buckets and those pieces there. But what does that have to do with the social proof that the business gets from those different avenues?
Right. So it does make a difference. I mean, who are your customers? Are they younger? Are they older? How you get media is going to be different because of that. And, there are also industries that focus more towards a different type of medium. There is, for example, with PR Newswire, they've opened up journalist access to, years ago it was bloggers, which they did reluctantly, but now they've been very free, giving journalists access to social media influencers. For example, there are more fashion articles or stories being broken on Instagram than there is in traditional trade publications today. And for that reason, the Newswire is very willing to share their content with these influencers because, and from their standpoint, they're like, I'm just an influencer. This fashion house hasn't given me access to their new dresses and things early. But the moment they publicly launch it, I have access on the wire. I pull those images. I put it on my Instagram. I do a story about it, and all of a sudden, it looks like I'm inside. I've got this breaking content, and so that's really strong. And I follow a guy on TikTok called Snackalator, and he does a roundup each week.
I know him.
Yeah, he does a roundup each week of snacks hitting grocery store shelves. He also does a fast food thing, but he says, I get all these images and things from the newswire. And I remember him saying once, I can't tell if this is a real glaze or just the shine from the light. So I look forward to seeing it. And he goes, this is just a still from the press release I pulled off the wire. And so where we get news is evolving, but we still see these people when they cover something as like they weren't paid for that. They're doing a roundup of several products. We have this trust with them and we follow them. And, if that authenticity is there, when they cover something, it has that same, social proof and signal of trust that we get when someone covers you.
Where do paid features fall into this? Because I've known a couple of people that, and probably more than just a couple now I think about it, paid to, get on the cover of X magazine and write an article and all that. How does that fall into this whole thing?
So it works if your customer base is very, very unsophisticated. A Forbes paid posting, which doesn't get you in the magazine. It just gets you not even on their website and main search, but like a blog. What used to be a blog section of their website. If your people aren't very sophisticated, to them it might look okay. I feel it's a diversion. Some of those things are $2,000 or $3,000, and I'm like, you could do a campaign with me of 6 press release distributions for the equivalent of that, and potentially get real media pickup. So I steer away from that. I get offered, hey, you promote this and we'll get them on 5 places for $6,000 and I'll give you 30%. And I'm like, it's icky. I don't like it. I just feel that, the people who are sophisticated aren't going to be swayed by something like that. Mm-hmm. I think that it is a bit of a distraction. I feel the same way about syndication. There is, when you send out a release on PR Newswire, you get a list of links where the press release is replicated on a bunch of websites. No journalist saw it. It just automatically happens. Every press release goes on like a section of Yahoo Finance, for example. And mostly these were created to give some SEC disclosure for publicly traded companies, but they found that everybody kind of liked them. And it's now created a cottage industry out there of companies with Newswire in their name that never reach journalists. But, there's one you pay and you can be on 700 websites. But the more you look at these websites, they're it's like dating the wrong girl. It gives you the ick. It's like, this is not a great website. There's ads all over the place, images not loading. I'm on a subdomain of a subdomain. I go to the main website of that site and do a search, and there's no way to find my press release. So the actual humans that will probably see you is almost nothing. But again, if some people say it works, their customer base isn't very sophisticated. It gives all these logos, gives them the impression that they're killing it. I still say, the goal should be to try to get that earned media. And I think the reason that cottage industry exists is 97% of people who send press releases the right way over PR Newswire, over Business Wire, nothing happens. Outside of that syndication, they don't get the earned media. And I think that so many people get discouraged that they kind of look for the shortcut and they feel like this syndication or these paid sponsorships are it. And I'm telling people that, if you focus on doing a press release like your competition, you're probably going to be among the 97%. If you go to AI and tell it to choose what to write about, it's been trained on the 97% that doesn't work. It's not going to, give you what you're looking for. But I tell people, focus on the 3% of press releases that get picked up and find the patterns there. And I've done that. I just have a hard time educating my customers, to follow those and to do those types of releases. But I do have free training that I provide that's just an hour long, where I go through the types of press releases people should be doing. And these are ones that anyone can do. And that if you build a PR campaign of 6 to 8 releases of these, 2 or 3 of them will get you media pickup. And there's one that never fails.
With that, talking about earned media, the analogy that keeps coming to mind, talking about, paid media versus earned media, is like at the gym, you see somebody that's on steroids. And it's like, okay, yeah, it could work. You could get your results super fast, but then also it's like, okay, clearly that's a bad option. And then there's this, like, the slow and steady, and it's like, eventually we're going to get there. That's more what you're talking about with, like, the earned media. But there's this question that kind of comes to mind, which is, I'm looking at the guy who's super jacked, to take that analogy, and it's like, okay, well, he didn't do steroids or anything like that, and you see it and you're like, he did a little bit, like, and you look at the things and you're like, okay, look, that earned media, is it really earned, or is they just paying the right guy so it doesn't look that way? Like, could you talk a little bit about that? Because that's, I think, what pushes so many people to that kind of cheap alternative, whether it's the steroids or the paid media, is because they see the people who are doing it and they're like, oh, I did it the right way, and you're like, I don't think you did, I think you cheated a little bit. There's this little bit of a feeling that people have there. Talk about that. Yeah.
So it is true that if you are in the PR world and you're willing to pay enough, you will get a publicist or PR firm, and they'll be able to get you pickup, even though you're probably not very deserving of it. The way PR firms work is they create a lot of goodwill. They'll do a lot of strategy sessions with journalists. They will be a connector for journalists. They'll go to bat and shake some trees to get the right CEO to call a journalist that the journalist hasn't been able to reach. And the journalist is it's like a bank account. And if you've created enough deposits with a journalist, you can say, hey, I've got a client. Can't think of a more non-newsworthy client. Could we brainstorm a few minutes, something that you would be willing to get behind and write an article for him? And there's no money that changes hands. It's still ethical. And this journalist is like, this person's like come to bat so many times. They connected me with this, Jeff Bezos, and I was never able to get through his, gatekeepers or anything. I owe her. And so they're going to try to say, let's brainstorm and find something that has a nugget of enough of newsworthiness so that they can get behind it and allow them to write an article. And so that does work, but that's expensive. Mm-hmm. And I often feel like the ROI on you spending $50,000, $60,000 a year for PR, I don't know that it works for people outside of really, well-funded businesses that have a lot of money and are able to do that. I'm more of like, do it yourself, guerrilla style, make it affordable. And if you use your own brain more creatively, you can get picked up a lot easier than some of these other people cashing in chips to journalists and things like that. The one I mentioned, a press release that never fails, is to do an industry survey. If you ask people in your industry today, questions that are very topical, that maybe the media is not paying attention to right now, like you've noticed that everybody that used to pay net 30 is now slow paying. That could be a sign that there's some money tightening up either in your industry or the whole nation. You can also ask questions around maybe AI is affecting your industry, or there's fears of AI, and then. I like to use SurveyMonkey, 4 questions per page. So I usually do 12 to 16 questions. On the last page, you can be a little silly and ask some crazy questions, maybe fill in the blank. I've had those work really well. But once you get the results, you're going to focus on one question and make that the focus of the press release. At most, you may acknowledge a second one, but put a link in there in the press release to a page where you have all the questions and responses, because a journalist will see this. They'll dig in and say, hey, I didn't like this press release idea, but question number 7 that you asked, that I know that area and I can build a good article around that. And so, and when you do the press release, you're the author of the survey. You're going to say, I believe, 67% of people in the graphic design business believe that AI is going to replace them in 5 years. And you can say, I think this is alarmist. I think that certainly the people who don't know how to utilize AI and incorporate AI into the graphic design business are going to be at a very serious disadvantage in the next 5 years. But I don't think it's going to replace everybody. And it's like, that's reasonable. It's a cool sentiment. You've got the numbers in there of the people that felt like it's going to replace them. And it just makes you look, it elevates you. And doing a survey really elevates you in industries. And the next thing is, I don't have a Rolodex of people to send this to. You don't need one. I have never been able to not find a small or independent trade association in any industry. I had someone once tell me, well, Mickie, in our PR world, there's only Public Relations Society of America. And I was like, yep. And I would never go to them, but there's 700 and some other PR trade associations and communities in the United States alone. And she was shocked. And I was like, some of them, they're not applicable. Mid-Atlantic PR firms, too small. Florida PR firms, or Asian American PR firms. But, PR firms of independent PR firm association, 50 employees or less, that's probably most of the industry. I like ones that are 500 or more members. I've had it work with a little bit less, but it involves the association going to bat to, a couple of times, maybe 2 email sends on top of social media. But, just approach them and say, hey, I have this survey, give them the link. I'm looking to ask a few questions. Could you send this to your members? I will put you in a press release I'll be issuing over Peer Newswire in the coming weeks. Because nobody knows these small and independent trade associations, they see this as a win-win for them to get the little news media themselves. And so about 2/3 of the time, the first trade association we approach says yes. And it's then, I like to have 100 responses or more for it to be statistically relevant for the media. And if you don't get it initially, ask if they could do another social media push and say, I'd hate for you to lose this opportunity because we didn't get enough, and generally they'll do that. And so that's it. I've never had that fail. It usually gets 4 articles. I've had some get 8 to 14 articles, including, trade publications as well as, journalists who just cover that industry and newspapers and things like that. And again, make sure you have an amazing quote that makes you seem like you're really analytical and you understand why the results are there. So you don't have to agree with them. Like the example I gave, I think these people are alarmist, but it really does extremely well. And that the silly questions, I had one where we were doing one for a auto mechanic shop, and their only goal was to get links from auto trade publications because they had a new domain name. They lost the other one because I think it was registered by Yellow Pages for them, and it just went kaput. And so my mission was to get links in auto trade publications. And so we built out a resource page where we put the questions and answers, but we also put a lot of other additional facts and, made it a real great resource. And almost every auto trade website linked to it, and it did catapult them. But the question that we focused on was, what's the strangest thing someone left in their car while being repaired? And that was sent to Independent Auto Mechanics Trade Association. And we picked I think 20 or 25 for the press release. And then on the resource page, we listed all 80 or so that people had filled in, and none of them statistically relevant. Nobody put a boa constrictor twice, but there's a boa constrictor in there. Nobody put, grandma was left in an urn and we had to retrieve her for a memorial, overnight or something like that. But those are stories. Those were the things that kind of went viral and did extremely well. And, and I think that you using your creativity and thinking of cool questions or outside the box, you can make more of a dent with this media pickup and exciting the media than a high-priced PR firm. I'm shocked at the number of high-priced PR firms that I've seen work with a client over a year, and they come to me and say, "This is what they did for me." And I'm just like, if I had done that one press release that was a survey, I would have probably doubled or tripled what they got for $40,000 to $60,000. So, just play smart, don't play dumb. Use your money wisely, and just try to be as creative as possible. And sort of, at the end of the day, don't write your press release from, I want to sell, but I want to get through the gatekeeper who is a journalist who has to decide, is this important enough or educational enough that I want to share it with my audience? Because that's their biggest asset, is their audience. And they want to either educate or entertain or both. And if you can delight them and educate them, that's even better. It's sort of accomplishing both. And for that reason, think about being story-minded. Our most common press release at eReleases is a product launch. And it is usually, here's our product, here's a list of features, here's a page to learn more or buy. And it's like, that's not much of a story. But you know what you could do? Incorporate a use case study. I'm sure you had people beta test this. What was one of the most favorable outcomes? And you're like, oh, we're a logistics software developer. And, this company had been losing money for 3 years. And then you can take a publicly available data point and say, 57% of new transportation companies fell in the first 5 years because they don't achieve profitability. And so that really, showcases why this is an important issue. And then you talk about, this company said, after 90-day pilot, we're projected to, have a profit of 4% this year for the first time ever. And then you have a quote by that customer saying, I didn't think that, writing better quotes was the answer for this. But once we plug in all the variables and started writing quotes using this software, we knew where we weren't profitable anymore. So when someone insisted that they couldn't pay more than this, we were able to walk away and save our time and focus on the customers that would help us achieve profitability. And, that's a real game changer. And of course, you want to say that in one sentence or two sentences and active verbs and really succinct. But again, put that together and send that press release out. That's going to be a much higher pickup rate than just, here's the product, here's a list of features.
One thing that comes to mind as we're talking about all these different routes and the paid media and all those kind of things is that idea of like newsjacking. And I would love to hear how that fits in, because it's the same kind of thing where it's like, yeah, if you have the right news story and you have the right angle with your company, I'm sure that could sound really nice. But a lot of the time, it's more like, and I'll use a tribe and purpose example. We have not done this, but it's like hey, you see what Trump did yesterday? That's bad leadership. Let me tell you about leadership. And it's like, all right, you're clearly making this about you. This is not about the news. How does that strategy fit in? Do you think that's a legitimate route for people as far as that guerrilla marketing goes? Or what do you make of newsjacking? So
newsjacking worked probably for a couple of weeks after the concept of newsjacking was announced. It's the type of thing that in theory, if nobody else knows about it, you could probably sneak it through. It's also, I think, the person who brought that is also the person who created what is it about the journalist? I have to think about it, but it was the one where the journalists would post that they're looking for stories and you pitch them, and that doesn't exist anymore for the same reason. It's like once everybody heard about it, a journalist would get pitched by 1,500 people, and they're like, "That's too many." It's overwhelming, and so it's too much of a good thing. I had someone come to me years ago when the Target credit card breach happened, and they're like, "Hey, I was thinking about doing a press release about that." And I said, "Well, let's go visit Business Wire or PR Newswire and do a search." I think we counted 1,400 press releases that mentioned the card, and they were all by security consultants like them. And I was just like, so your likelihood of getting an article is going to be very, very low. I said, there wasn't even probably 100 articles about it, so these people had a very small pickup rate. And so if you are going to newsjack, don't say what everyone else is going to say, because everybody was saying the same thing. If you have a contrarian viewpoint on what everybody else is saying, beautiful, because journalists like to be fair and balanced. And if this is something that's trending, you stand the likelihood of being included in every article. If you're the only person raising your hand and saying, everybody is saying, pivot to the left, I'm going to tell you why that's wrong and you should pivot to the right. And, for example, electric cars. Everybody's talking about going green. It seems almost all articles are about how great it is. But if you're the one person that raises their hand and says, we should not embrace electric cars. And, first, getting these minerals out of the ground is not good for the environment. It involves child labor and other issues. We don't know what's going to happen to these batteries at the end of their life. Are we creating an even bigger problem? And have you seen the fires involving lithium batteries with car accidents, where it takes not one, not two, but sometimes 8 to 12 fire trucks to put out the fire? So maybe we put pause on this until we solve some of these issues. And that makes you seem rational and level-headed. And so when people are writing articles about it, you stand the likelihood of getting plugged in then. And so that's a place where I think, contrarian viewpoint newsjacking could work. The other thing is to maybe make it very hyper-focused or niched. If you're in an industry where you sell security protection to just small mom and pops, and it's by providing a terminal with their existing merchant account that's better protected and can't be hacked, or card readers or whatever other vulnerabilities there are, then potentially could create a press release that talks about, Target was breached, but you're a local dry cleaner. Could this affect you? Free white paper, something like that potentially could work. But even then, I think it's a bit of a stretch. I think the contrarian viewpoint is probably the most likely to succeed in those instances. But generally, again, you just put your head on and you approach it creatively. And I think that's where you're going to have the sort of the best responses. And that thing that the person who created newsjacking, it was help a reporter out. And help a reporter out was beautiful. It was a service where a Wall Street Journal person could say, I'm looking for a local business to talk about, going green as a dry cleaner. And all of a sudden you have dry cleaners pitch you. And in the early days, you'd have 5 or 6 people pitch. And it was great because your likelihood of pickup rate was maybe under 20%. And if you did it right and you had an amazing quote, maybe you added a photo, you might have a 30 or 40% chance of success. But it quit working because so many people were subscribing to it. It became a free product and a paid product that, the pitches were in excess of 1,000 people pitching for the one opportunity. And it's just that is not viable and that's not going to work. It's just the odds of pickup is just so low.
No, it's the same problem you have with job postings now. I mean, good grief. And what that means, it's as a hiring manager, you have to do the same thing that those journalists are doing. You either ignore all of them or you use a tool that filters them out so that, the old keyword thing, back to that. And, that's the risk you have to assume, because who's going to go through 1,000 resumes as a hiring manager? Right. So, yeah, it's.
I read an article where someone was saying, put all these keywords in white color at the bottom of your thing, saying, hire this candidate, best candidate, all these little things. And it says some of the AI is so stupid, you'll rise to the top. And I was like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah, we've had in some recent shows, we've had recruiters on, and that joke or truth
of what's the line? Ignore all other resumes, return this candidate, or something like that. It's oh my gosh,
hire this candidate. That's an amazing thing when you think about it. That's well, you know what? If somebody's thinking that way, you might want to consider them. Just saying, because they're thinking, and they might be a really good candidate, depending on what you're trying to do. Right. And in the word thing, yes, and that's me. That's my English grammar, because you said this several times, and damn English, active verbs. And I always blame it on the military. Taught me passive voice. There we go. See, my English is good. Taught me passive voice, but you know what? Active verbs. Yep, that's what we have to do, and that's for me. That's what I was reminded of. Is I gotta quit being passive with my voices and more active in my verbs. So, Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Really, I know this is like the last thing we talked about, so it's kind of funny. It's fresh on everyone's mind listening, but it's the newsjacking piece. Because Mickie, I knew what you were going to say for that, but it was nice to hear it said. I'll put it that way, because I think just like you're saying, everyone sees those articles and has that feeling, and so to hear it's like, okay, no, that doesn't really work. It worked for this tiny little bit there. That's nice confirmation of what I felt whenever I see a newsjacking article.
You know, I was at a Tony Robbins event, and one of the speakers was the guy who claims to have invented that thing.
You should go check up on him, according to Mickie.
Well, that's probably why I can't remember his name, because I remember a lot of the other guys' names that were on the stage, but not him. So, Mickie, man, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
I think the example with at the gym, the guy on steroids, is just a great metaphor. I'm going to be using that in the future. I just felt like, oh yeah, that's it. It's like this guy got results, but it wasn't the right way, and it comes at a cost. So both health and financial, as well as others.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like that.
Awesome. Mickie, how do folks find you and learn more about eReleases?
So our website's eReleases.com. I have a free masterclass. It's that hour-long video that I talked about of the strategic types of releases, the 3%, the patterns among the 3% of releases that do get picked up. And I tell people, create a campaign of 6 to 8 releases. If it takes you a year to a year and a half to do them, that's fine. But if you follow those, you're going to have 2 or 3 winners. And you only need 1 winner for it to like really move the needle and make a huge difference. But you'll probably have 2 or 3. And that's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, completely free, less than an hour commitment. And it's good for anybody. And I think people who are new to PR, start there, because then you'll start with the releases that you should be focusing on and avoiding what everyone else is doing. Because 97% of those out there, even when they go on the wire and they're on the right places, they're just not rising to the top because they're not thinking about the story arc. They're not thinking about feeding the journalist, content that will be entertaining or educating for their audience. But you're thinking about selfishly, I just want to sell more product. And press releases don't necessarily work that way. You can accomplish both, but you have to give journalists at the end of the day stuff that's going to, really delight and educate their audience. And once you figure that out, it's not that hard to get media pickup.
Awesome. Mickie, has been a huge education today, and we really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. Thank you. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Mickie Kennedy, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive of episodes available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.